Hello, hello, hello。昨天是没有声音，嗯，昨天是没有声音的。看一下今天调一下，看今天有没有声音。好了，好了。Hello, hello, hello。昨天是没有声音。OK，好，好了，好，今天可以了，It's OK 的呢。OK，昨天把这个 Chapter 8读完了，我们现在是 Chapter 9。The Secret Science, the condensed history. OK，帮我，您是英语老师，帮我翻译成中文，包括翻译的细节部分。谢。The condensed history of Federal Reserve banking. Condensed 简要的。Condensed, condensed, condensed. The unbroken record of fraud, boom, busts, and economic chaos. The unbroken record of 持续不断的 unbroken record. Fraud, booms, busts, economic chaos. The formation of Bank of England, the world's first central bank, which became the model for the Federal Reserve System. Banks of deposits first appeared in early Greece, concurrent with the development of coinage. Coinage itself. There were none in India at the time of Alexander the Great. They also operated in Egypt as part of public granary system. They appeared in Damascus in 1012. The 1200 in Barcelona it was the city-state of Venice, however, which is considered the cradle of banking as we know it today. The Bank of Venice, the the secret scene. By the 1361, there already had been sufficient abuse in banking that the Venetian Senate passed a law forbidding bankers to engage in any other commercial pursuit, thus removing the temptation to use their deposits for funds to finance their own enterprises. They were also required to open their books for public inspection and, and to keep their stockpile of coins available for viewing all at all reasonable times. In 1524, a board of banking examiners was created, and 2 years later, all bankers were required to settle accounts between themselves in coin rather than by check. In, in spite of these precautions, however, the largest bank at that time, the House of Pisano, and Tipolo, had been active in lending against its reserves, and in 1584 was forced to close its doors because of inability to refund depositors. The government picked up the pieces at that point, and a state bank was established. The Banco de la Pizza de Lora. Having learned from the recent experience with bankruptcy, the new bank was not allowed to make any loans. There could be no profit from the issuance of credit. The bank was required to sustain itself solely from fees for coin storage, exchanging currencies, handling the transfer of payments between customers, and notary services. The formula for honest banking had been found. The bank prospered and soon became the center of Venetian commerce. Its paper receipts were widely accepted far beyond the country's borders, and in fact, instead of being discounted in exchange for gold coins, as was the usual practice, they actually carried a premium over coins. This was because there were so many kinds of coins in circulation and such a wide variance of quantity within the same type of coins that one had to be expert to evaluate their worth. The bank performed this service automatically when it took the coins into its vault. Each was evaluated, and the receipt given for it was an accurate reflection of its intrinsic worth. The public, therefore, was far more certain of the value of the paper receipts than of many of the coins, and consequently was willing to exchange a little bit more for them. Unfortunately, with the passage of time and the fading from memory of previous banking abuses, the Venetian Senate eventually succumbed to the temptation of credit, strapped for funds and not willing to face the voters with a tax increase. The politicians decided they would authorize a new bank without restriction against loans. As the bank created the money they needed and then borrowed it. So in 1619, the Bank was formed, which, like its bankrupt presi- pre- pre- predecessor, predecessor, began immediately to create money out of nothing for the purpose of lending it to the government. 18 years later, the realtor was absorbed into the new bank. Absorbed, and history's first tiny flame of sound banking splendored and died. Throughout the 15th and 16th centuries, banks have been springing up all over Europe, almost without exception. However, they followed the language practice of lending money which was not truly available for loan. They create excess obligations against their reserves, and as a result, every one of them failed. That is not to say that their owners and directors did not prosper. It merely means that their depositors lost all or part of their assets entrusted for safekeeping. En- Entrusted for safekeeping. The Bank of Amsterdam. It wasn't until the Bank of Amsterdam was founded in 1609 that we find a second example of some banking practices, and the results were virtually the same as previously experienced by the bank only accepted deposits and steadfastly refused to make loans. Its income was derived, derived solely from service fees. All payments in and around Amsterdam soon come to be made in paper currency issued by the bank, and in fact, that currency carried a premium over coin itself. The burgomasters, and the city council were required to take an annual oath, swearing that the coin reserve of the bank was intact. Intact. Governs remind us for centuries after its founding, it functioned usefully and with notably strict rectitude. Deposits were deposits, and initially the money remained in storage for the man who owned it until he transferred it into another. None was loaned out. None was loaned out in 1672 when the armies of Louis 16 approached Amsterdam. There was grave alarm. Merchants beside besieged the bank, some in the suspicion that their wealth might not be there. All who thought their money were paid, and when they found this to be so, they didn't want payment, as was often to be observed in the future. However, desperately, people want their money from a bank when they are assumed they can get it. They no longer want it. The principles of honesty and the restraint 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 were not to be long-lived, however. The temptation of easy profit from money creation was simply too great. As early as individuals have been permitted to overdraw their accounts, which means, of course, that the bank creates new money out of their debt. In later years, enormous loans were made to the Dutch East Indies Company. The truth finally became known to the public in January 1790, and demands for a return of deposits were steady from that day forward. 10 months later, the bank was declared insolvent and was taken over by the city of Amsterdam. The Bank of Hamburg, the third and last experience with honest banking, occurred in Germany with the Bank of Hamburg. For over 2 centuries, it faithfully adhered to the principle of safe deposits. So, scrupulous Scrupulous was its administration that, when Napoleon took possession of the bank in 1813, he found marks in silver held against liabilities of yeah, none was more than was actually needed. Most of the bank's treasures that Napoleon hoarded away was restored a few years later by the French government and in the form of securities. It is not clear if the securities were of much value, but even if they were not the same as silver. Because of foreign invasion, the bank's currency was no longer fully convertible into coins, receipt money. As receipt money, it was not fractional money. It was now fractional money, and the self-destruct mechanism had been set in motion. The bank lasted another 55 years until 1871, when it was ordered to liquidate all of its accounts. 清算 liquidate 清算 That is the end of the short story of honest banking. From that point forward, fractional reserve banking became the universal practice, but there were to be many interesting twists and turns in its development before it would be ready for something as sophisticated as the Federal Reserve System. Early banking in England. In England, the first paper money was the exchequer order of Charles II. It was pure fiat, and although it was decreed legal tender, it was not widely used. It was replaced in 1696 by the JEKYLL bill. Exchequer. The bill was redeemable in gold, and the government went to great lengths to make sure that there was enough actual coins or bullions to make good on the people, on the pledge. In other words, it was true receipt money, and it became widely accepted as the media of exchange. Furthermore, the bills were considered as short-term loans to the government and actually pay interest to the holders. In 1707, the recently created Bank of England was given given tile responsibility of managing this currency, but the bank found more profit in the circulation of its own banknotes, which were in the form of fractional money, and which provided for the collection of interest, not the payment of it. Consequently, the government's bills gradually passed out of use and were replaced by banknotes, which by the middle of the 18th century became England's only paper money. It must be understood that, at this time, the Bank of England was not yet fully developed as a central bank. It had been given a monopoly over the issue of banknotes within London and other prime geographic area, but were not yet declared as legal tender. No one was forced to use them. They were merely private fractional receipts for gold coin issued by the private bank, which the public could accept, reject, and discount at its pleasure. Legal tender status was not conferred upon the bank's money until 1833. Meanwhile, Parliament had granted charters to numerous other banks throughout the empire, and without exception, the issuance of fractional money led to their ultimate demise and the ruin of their depositors. Disaster after disaster had come upon the country, says Shaw, because of the indifferences of the state to these mere private paper's tokens. The Bank of England, however, was favorited by the government above all others, and time after time it was saved from insolvency by Parliament. Parliament. However, it came to be that way was an interesting story. The Bank of England, the Bank of England, early bank in England. The Bank of England was financially exhausted after half a century of war against France and numerous civil wars fought largely over excessive taxation. By the time of the War of the League of Augsburg, King William was in serious need for new revenue. 20 years previous, King Charles II had flat out repudiated a debt of over £1 million, which had been lent to him by scores of goldsmiths. With the result that tens of thousands of them lost their savings. This was still fresh in everyone's memory, and needless to say, The government was no longer considered a good investment risk. Unable to increase taxes and unable to borrow, Parliament became desperate for some other way to obtain the money. The objective, says Gross Clause, was not to bring the money mature under more intelligent control, but to provide means outside the onerous source source of taxes and public loans for the financial requirement of an impecunious government. 不负责任的 impecunious government. There were two groups of men who saw unique opportunities arised out of this necessary. The first group considered the political scientists within the government. The second was compromised of the monetary scientists from the emerging business of banking. The organizer and the spokesman of this group was William Paterson from Scotland. Paterson had been to America and came back with a grandiose scheme of obtaining a British chapter for a commercial company to colonize the easterners of Panama, then known as Darien. The government was not interested in that, so Paterson turned his attention to a scheme that did interest it very much, the creation of money. The two groups came together and formed an alliance. No, that is too soft a word. The American Heritage Dictionary defines a cabal as a conspiratorial group of plotters and intriguers. A conspiratorial group of plotters and intriguers. This is no other word that could so accurately describe this group, with much of the same secrets and mystery that surrounded the meeting on JEKYLL. The cabal meeting Mercer's Chapel in London and hammered out a 7-point plan which would serve their mutual purpose. Mutual 共同的 The government would grant a chapter to the monetary scientists to form a bank. The bank would be given a monopoly to issue banknotes, which would circulate as England's paper currency. The bank would create money out of nothing with only a fraction of its total currency. It's backed by coin. The monetary scientists then would loan the government all the money they needed. The money created for government loans would be backed primarily by government IOUs. Although this money was to be created out of nothing and would cost nothing to create, the government would pay interest on it at the rate of, oh my god, government IOUs would also be considered as reserves for creating additional loan money for private commerce. These loans also would earn interest. Thus, the monetary scientists would collect double interest on the same nothing. Sorry. The circular, which was distributed to attract subscribers to the bank's initial stock offering, explained the bank had benefits of interest on all the monies with it. The bank creates out of nothing. The chapter was issued in, and the strange creature took its initial breath of life. It was the world's first central bank. Rothbard wrote, in short, since there were not enough private savers willing to finance the deficit, Passy and his group were graciously willing to buy government bonds, provided they could do so with newly created out-of-thin-air banknotes carrying a raft of special privileges. With them, privileges with them, privileges with them. This was a splendid deal for Pearson and Company, and the government benefited from the flee flam of the seemingly legitimate banks financing their debts as soon as the Bank of England was chaptered in. King William himself had various members of Parliament rush to become shareholders of the new money factory they had just created. 没有足够的私人储蓄业特许成立。Out of thin air, raft of special privileges, flim flam, manufactory, factory, rush to become shareholders. In short, since there were not enough private savers willing to finance the deficits, Parsons and his group were graciously willing to buy government bonds, provided they could do so with newly created also senior banknotes carrying a raft of special features with them. Carrying a raft of special features with them. This was a splendid deal for President Company, and the government benefits from the flim-flam and the seemingly legitimate banks financing their debts. A seemingly legitimate bank financing their debts. As soon as the Bank of England was chattered in, King William himself and the various members of Parliament rushed to become shareholders of the new money factory they had just created. The secret science of money. From inflation to bank runs. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, I think that's all for today. 这是177人技巧。对，186，186，186，187， yeah. Okay, I think that's all for today. Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow. Happy weekend. See you tomorrow.